Welcome back, my computer duder, to Testicular Health with the Skeletor. Yeah. First, take out your scrotum. No, actually, probably more politics. That's what you come to my channel for, right? That's apparently very fucking lucrative. You can get rich just talking about political shit and pressing on people's buttons and getting them angry and then selling them a bunch of bullshit like heirloom seeds and buckets of emergency food. You just get them scared about the end of the world. That's a racket, man. We're calling shit natural and selling it to hippies. Oh, that one was a spicy nacho burp. So you know what I've been thinking about lately? What is going to be the civil rights battle of my grandchildren's generation? Realistically. And let's not touch on perverted stuff like sex with animals, although that's probably going to become a political civil rights thing at some point. But more like intersections of technology with human rights. Like if I think everybody agrees that if a human being has a robot arm, they're still a human. And they deserve 100% human rights. But what if it's 90% robot, but it has a human brain? Should that still legally be human? Is the brain the entirety of what makes us a human and guarantees us human rights? I think most people would still say yes. But what if you go further? What if it only has half of a human brain? Or a quarter? What percentage of a human brain do you need in order to be a legal person? And does it need to be a human brain? Or can it, what if it's a dog brain? What if it's chimeric? What if it's a hybrid? Stuff like this is going to happen. It's either in the process of happening. And the reason it's going to happen is because there's a lot of profit to be made by having machines do labor. But there's a lot of kinds of labor that's hard to make an artificial intelligence that can do. But if you can start to introduce living tissue and have the power of organic brains doing stuff like pattern recognition and handling exceptions to stuff that you've programmed for, especially if the AI handles most of it, but then the brain kicks in when the AI encounters something that locks it up or confuses it. And that may sound grisly, but if there's enough profit in something, I guarantee you it'll happen. That's like a law of the universe. So, can I have a robot slave, basically, if it has only 10% of a human brain? Does it matter which part of the brain? What about if it's just like the front? If it lacks the frontal lobe, so it's not self-aware, is that okay? Like we like to think of these people sounding the moral alarm about cloning and animal-human hybrids as being just Christian fuddy-duddies who want to control everybody's morality. And when it comes to stuff like abortion, that's definitely the case. They mostly just want to screw women out of having the ability to control their own fertility. Because a lot of these men are really, I hate to use Tumblr language, but toxic and misbehaved. And they're like, why would women stick around and stay in a marriage with me unless she had to for the kids? Is what they're thinking, I'm pretty sure. But when they say stuff about cloning, they kind of have half a point. We're getting into uncharted territory. There's going to be some weird shit happening, especially with cybernetics. For example, there's a program it has been for many years, to graft the head of a bee or a moth onto a chip and use it for avionics control. Because evolution has gifted insects with a impressively small and efficient avionics processor, which is to say their brains, and that's much smaller and more energy efficient than the computers that humans build for the exact same purpose. So as Frankensteinian as it seems, it can be a better solution to just cut off a part of an animal and stick it inside of a machine with all the hardware necessary to keep that part of it alive. And I think everybody would agree that's wrong to do for like a dog or something. But if it's an insect, insects are kind of like nature's equivalent of robots anyways. But then there is a slippery slope, and slippery slope may be a fallacy, but the only fallacy is if you imply that because B followed A, that C will follow B necessarily. That doesn't mean it can't happen that way. It could still happen that way. It's just not guaranteed to. But the slippery slope here is, okay, what if there's money to be made by using the brain of a more advanced animal? And what if I take human DNA and change it a little bit? If I change it a little bit and grow a human brain in a vat that's, say, 20% dolphin DNA, can I do that and have it not be a human legally? Can I now use it to do whatever kind of work I need it to do and not have to deal with human rights law because it's technically not fully human? What percentage of animal DNA does it have to be before I can do that? Is it 1%? Is it like a one drop rule? Is it if it's 1% human DNA, I'm not allowed to use it? Because I think that would actually kind of be absurd. Because mice have been created for experiments with 1% human DNA before, and they were still considered mice. It was still considered legal to experiment on them. This is the real mad scientist shit, man. This is the shit that you think about when social norms don't matter to you any more than rat turds. I do not give a rat turd about what somebody thinks is too far out or gross. If it's, that's not to say I'm amoral. I just want to be the one who makes the decision with my own reasoning faculties as to whether something's moral or not. I don't let somebody else define for me what's right and wrong. It's important to me what's right and wrong, but I feel a better grasp on what's right and wrong for me than a stranger. Especially when that person defines right and wrong in a way that sounds an awful lot like just how they want society to work. And they try to back it up with supernatural claims. That's where it starts to get iffy for me. But if we move into a future where fucked up shit's happening with putting animal brains in robots, maybe some basis for morality would be better than nothing. I don't know. Like, imagine if you had a home robot, okay? And it was extremely bright. It could handle any task you threw at it. It could even have conversations with you. It's a little dim, but it's like intellectually on the level of like a 10-year-old child. And that's because it has an animal brain. It has a partially chimp, partially dolphin, partially human brain. Are you cool with that? This is a creature who would have no possibility of a happy life outside of the role that it was built for, because it's not like you can take its brain out and set the brain free in nature. And it's not like you could take the robot itself out and put it in the woods and say go and be free, because there's no fucking power outlets in the woods for it to recharge itself, or the systems that support the biological parts of its body. You've created something that can only survive within the technological infrastructure of a high-tech first world country. So it should at least be clear that we have a obligation on some level. And at the same time, there was a sci-fi book, I forget the name, where a ethical food animal was created, like a cow, but it wanted to be eaten. Like its purpose in life was to be eaten and savored. So it was ethical to eat it because it wanted us to do that. It couldn't be happy. Like the Mr. Meeseeks, how they just want to do whatever you tell them to and then die. If you created this creature that was mostly a robot, but that had a biological brain, that you changed the DNA so it wasn't legally a human, and you made it so it wanted to serve you, wouldn't it be unethical to try to set it free? Wouldn't it be unethical not to let it serve you? If this sounds fucked up, it's because it is. But these are the kinds of questions we have to ask, because this is not future stuff. A lot of this stuff is happening in preliminary stages right now. We have put rat brains inside of robots just to see how they interact with the world, and they appear to be able to control them. You can imagine like a chimp brain controlling like a fighter jet or something, or like a drone, And there's good reasons to do that, because if we, you know, terrorists that we're fighting have been able to hack our drones in the past. If we remotely control them, they can take control of the drones. But if you have an onboard brain that has been trained, even if it's not as smart as a human, if it's been trained exhaustively, then it doesn't need to be as smart. It just needs to act on its training. It sounds like a made-for-TV movie that Sci-Fi Channel would put out. So what do you think? How much genetic difference does there have to be for it not to be a human with full human rights? And how much brain matter can there be in a machine? But we didn't even get into whether you should be able to have sex with it or marry it. What if somebody wanted to marry their butler with a brain that has the DNA of like 6 different animals? That sounds like a National Enquirer. Like, my dolphin-brained robot butler seduced me, with like a picture of Batboy. But it's moving so quickly that we kind of have to have that conversation now, because it's happening at the same time that we're having the conversation. It's being developed. Like, have you seen those dragonflies that they surgically attach little cameras and solar panels and chips to so they can use them as spy drones? What's the ethics of that? If that's okay, why is it not okay to put their head on a computer chip? Cyborg ethics is fucking... It's a sticky wicket, man, is what it is. And then there's animal-human hybrids, which I don't know. I think it's not possible to carry those to term, but it could be made possible if you use like an artificial womb or something. And there's a lot of fur. Go to DeviantArt. Go to DeviantArt and search for furry shit. You can see there's a lot of people with very high interest in the creation of human-animal hybrids, so they can fuck them. Because that's what humanity is like. Humanity wants to use advanced technology to make new things to stick our penis into, or to have their weird half human, half animal penis stuck into us. Well, you know, we're perverts. The bigger the brain of an animal, the more sexually perverted it becomes, because they apply their intelligence to their own sexuality. And we're okay with creativity most of the time, but when you apply creativity to sexuality, that's what we call perversion. So that's where it starts to get really uncomfortable and weird. Like when you see somebody draw a picture of a Sonic the Hedgehog character in a diaper fighting Simba from The Lion King, who has a big bloated belly because inside of there is Shrek as a baby with an umbilical cord going to him, like fetus Shrek. And it's like, come on. Come on, don't do that. Stop drawing that. But they're not gonna stop drawing that. And when you give the technology to a species that creates that kind of shit to actually make it real, you're looking at a nightmare. You're looking at... I mean, a lot of stuff that today would be a nightmare to past generations that we don't bat an eyelid at, like gay marriage. It was never an issue for me, but then I grew up while it was becoming normalized. Maybe this is the shit that's going to gross me out. Maybe I'll be the old man that gets called a bigot because I don't want weird, pervy, deviant, like inflation furries to become real. and to be walking the streets and to have to look at them. Like if you ever go to Elvis the Alien's channel, he does a lot of specials on weird fetish artwork on DeviantArt. Imagine that outside your window. Imagine going down the street and there's some dude who is partially inflated. He's got a bicycle pump. He's inflating himself, and he's like a half dog with neon fur, and his dick's out. And you can't say anything. If you say anything, if you're like, "That's gross. What are you doing? Why are you doing that in public?" Then you lose your job, and you can't work anywhere. Nobody will hire you because you're a inflatophobe or a furophobe or whatever the fuck they've attached phobe to in order to delegitimize the fear and disgust that is natural to experience when you see something that far outside of what is healthy and natural. I hate to use that word because that is a buzzword. Natural is so hard to define. Like airplanes aren't natural. We ride airplanes. But at the same time, I don't think that reasoning can be used to defend the creation of literal mutants. Like horrific, weird, pervy mutants, which is going to happen. Like, the same people... Do you remember during the gay marriage debates years ago, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert mocked intensely the idea that there would be anything after the gay marriage debate? They implied very strongly that it was the last step towards the completion of the civil rights project. But now we're doing the trans thing. Now there was, gay marriage got passed, and then it was LGBT. And now if you go and Google it, it's actually LGBTQIA for queer, something, intersex, asexual, I think. So they are adding letters. That's something that they mocked the idea of, that, but it's happening. All the stuff they make fun of, when they make fun of stuff like that, it's to disarm you. It's so that you won't take seriously the prospect of that thing happening, and you won't prepare a defense. You won't prepare opposition to it. And then when it finally does get here, they say, all right, well, it did happen, but then I never said that. I never said that there would be nothing after. They did say that. You can dig up the clips on YouTube. And then they'll say, well, what's your problem with it? You shouldn't have a problem with this stuff unless you're a bigot. I'm okay with being a bigot against literal monsters, against the kind of shit you see on DeviantArt, if they make that real. I don't want to live in that world. I want the world to be a beautiful place. I want the world to be an inspirational place with technology and colonies on the moon and Mars. I don't want it to become just a parade of horrific cartoon fetishes. I don't think it improves the world to take everybody's fetish and put it in the public square at the same time. I think there are some things that are best kept in the bedroom. And probably there's people who are going to want my head for saying that. Like, I don't know if you've seen the picture where Spyro the Dragon and all of his buddies are working at Subway. And Spyro's taking a huge shit into the sandwich and making a turd Subway sandwich, and all the other animals are putting toppings onto it. Imagine if that's a new sexuality that you have to learn how to tolerate. And suddenly there's new sections of restaurants for people who want to eat shit, who want dishes that incorporate feces into the ingredients list. And you're like, oh, that'll never happen. That'll never happen. Well, guess what? Your grandfather was told that gay marriage would never happen. Your grandfather probably fought for the right of, for interracial marriage, and rightfully so. But he was told. Some people probably said, well, if we do interracial marriage, then next it's going to be gay marriage, and he probably laughed at that. Probably there were a lot of people in the media who said, that doesn't follow. It's still one man and one woman. That doesn't mean that that men will be marrying men. That's a totally different thing. And yet here we are. Here we are. That exact thing has happened. A lot of the shit that figures like that make fun of, they know is true privately. They make fun of it in order to get the foot in the door, in order to create space, in order to drive back the opposition and ridicule the opposition into silence and into complicity long enough that they can make this shit happen and get it permanent and get it embedded in the culture so it's not going anywhere. Once you're aware of that, you see it everywhere. You see it everywhere. That's a lot of what comedians do, is they ridicule the people who they want to politically disempower. Not because those people are actually wrong or full of shit, but because they don't want those people to succeed. Then again, I guess, I mean, as gross as I think something is, it's kind of hard to be opposed to that and also be in support of individual rights. This is supposed to be the country where you can live any way you want to. And the public square doesn't belong to any group of people. There's no one group that totally dominates and says, you can use the public square for this, but not that. Probably that's the kind of argument that we're going to hear in order to defend truly gross stuff being seen in public. I guess kids already kind of see that shit when they watch like PewDiePie or any YouTube channel, so it's not like it's something they haven't seen before. It's just, I don't imagine yourself out on a stroll one nice summer Sunday, and the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and then you round a corner in the park, and then there's two furries, and one's shitting into the other's mouth, and they're like, do you mind? And you're like, what the fuck are you doing? And they're like, oh, we have a fecaphobe, or is it a fucking furaphobe? And suddenly your face is on fucking Twitter, and everybody's saying how hateful you are, and how you're Satan and Hitler. Because you don't want to go to the park and see shitty fucking furries with their costumes covered in poo particles taking fat, salty dumps into each other's mouths. Probably there's furries out there who are offended by that. And they're like, we have nothing to do with the poop people. But then probably there's people who eat shit, and they're like, don't compare us to the furries. All these groups think that their personal fetish is okay and beyond reproach, and it's all the other fetishes that are the real weirdos. But they're all pushing at the same time for the normalization of whatever it is that they're into, so that the entire world can become their sex playground. There's a place for sexual stuff. It's called the bedroom. I don't think that's oppression. Maybe that's not my call to make. I don't know. Probably something on Tumblr would be like, of course you don't think it's oppression. You're a cis white male, blah, 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 blah. Well, can we agree that it's kind of gross and weird to have shit like that going on in public spaces that are supposed to be nice places for families to go? You're like, oh, well, that won't happen. It will happen. All the shit that's happened so far is stuff that our grandparents thought would never happen. The worst, pervious, grossest stuff you can think of will happen and will be normalized. It's largely either already happened or is in the process of happening, and the universities that are funded by your tax dollars are teaching students that it's okay, and that people who oppose it are demons who deserve to be ridiculed and blackballed so they can't support themselves. How did this happen? Who is doing this? Who's behind this? Who's pushing for Western cultures in particular to be grossified could be turned into just a picture of hell on earth. Do you want to live in that world? And how technology comes into it is technology gives us the power to make shit like that real. It gives us the power to make it real, and we have no restraint. Anything that we want, we kind of force to happen. We make it real. Because humans are weird and gross, but we're also smart. We're kind of too smart for our own good. So if we have an idea and it fucking tickles our boner, and we're like, wouldn't it be great if that was out there in real life? I don't want that, man. I don't think that's an exaggeration either. They always say it's an exaggeration, and then it happens. And then they say, well, it's here now. There's no getting rid of it, so you should just learn to deal with it. The alternative to learning to deal with shit like that is getting prepared to oppose it before it becomes normal. But step one, you have to take it seriously that kind of shit's going to happen, because past generations were caught unaware by not taking seriously the prospect that these different things would occur. And I don't think that the steps in the civil rights movement to date have been wrong, but then again, I was raised at the same time that they were occurring, so to me it's normal. That's kind of the name of the game, is normalization. And probably to the generations alive when shit like this is happening, it will be normal, and they won't understand why you are opposed to it, and they'll think you seem just randomly insane and hateful for saying that people shouldn't dress up like Spyro the Dragon and put on a play for children where they take a huge shit into a Subway sandwich and then eat it. Just whatever asinine, disgusting thing you can imagine. Imagine that being treated as absolutely sacred. And you cannot say word one about it that's negative. Or people descend upon you and use the internet to completely destroy you. Big Brother is here already, and it's us. The government doesn't need to use the internet to monitor and persecute Americans. Americans do that themselves to other Americans. That's what doxing is. And business owners aren't going to give a shit. They're only concerned about appearing moral, however the public defines moral, so that it doesn't hurt their profits. So if the new thing becomes defending Spyro sandwich shitters, then they're going to get behind it. They're going to have advertising campaigns defending the right of people to dress as Spyro the Dragon and shit into a Subway sandwich. Or to roleplay reverse birth or vor scenes from Disney, whatever fucked up thing people are doing by then. Almost anything you can think of, no matter how fucked up, somebody out there takes totally seriously and has it all entwined with their concept of romance, and they have fantasies about marrying turd creatures or inflated balloon furries or whatever the fuck. And they take it totally seriously and they vote. So, however difficult it is to take seriously the prospect of shit getting that bad, it will almost certainly get that bad if nothing is done to prevent it. Anything that can go wrong will, and that also applies to shit like this. So if you're cool with gay marriage, I'm cool with you. We're on the same page. But if there's a line that you don't want to see crossed, if there's something you can imagine yourself not being cool with, guaranteed that's going to be tried. That's going to be tried. And you can't conceive of that happening. How do I say this? For the same reasons your grandfather could not have conceived of gay marriage or transsexuals. Like, they came from a generation where a man in a dress was a punchline. in like a Monty Python skit. And now we're being asked to take that totally deadly serious. And if we don't, then we don't get to work. We don't get to have a job. We have to be homeless. We have to die due to homelessness and exposure and starvation. That's what it comes down to. If you can't work, then you die. And if you are not on board with whatever the fuck the latest, virtue signaling crusade is, then you can't work. You can't eat. It's an extremely effective way to force certain changes to the culture that most people don't want, is to make them afraid for their livelihood, for their ability to feed their families. And it always feels right. It feels justified when you're part of the mob persecuting some guy for disagreeing with your politics. But if it's one guy versus another guy, or women, that's one thing. If it's 100 people versus one, that's not a fair fight. No matter how you try to convince yourself that it is, because you're on the winning side and you don't like the ideas of the person being beaten by the crowd. Those are not. That's a beatdown. That's a guy and a bunch of his friends jumping out and beating the shit out of you. That's not a fair fight. I can't believe I don't have more soil. And the damnedest thing I ever saw was a social justice warrior complaining about being doxxed and whining and moaning about how horrible it was and how it was affecting her life, when she was a notorious doxer, and her whole blog, the point of her blog, was to document the effects of her doxing people that she disagreed with. But suddenly, because it happens to her, it's a tragedy. Granted, I mean, maybe I'm a hypocrite because I read about this on a different blog of somebody who doxes social justice warriors. So there's blood on everybody's hands. But I think no matter who uses mob violence as a tactic, it's wrong. But by far the most prolific mob violence users are people who think that they're doing it in the name of equality and inclusion and tolerance, never thinking to themselves, is everything in the world good and right to tolerate? And they just never take seriously the prospect that there's not going to be anything that they personally find gross and scary that gets rolled up into the cluster of different lifestyles that we all are forced to collectively tolerate. Nobody thinks that until it happens. And suddenly they find themselves on the other side of the conflict. Usually when they turn like 20 or 30. Or older than that, probably. Maybe it's just happening to me prematurely. It will happen. It will happen. Shit you don't personally approve of will become part of the family of conditions that you are forced to approve of. And all the fun you have doxing and destroying the livelihoods of people that you personally think deserve it, that's going to be you at some point. If you think that'll never happen because there's no scientific basis for defending this or that, there's a scientific basis for damn near anything. You can make it appear to support almost anything you want if you're good enough at spinning, if you can put the right spin on it. Like, probably you could find evidence that people have conditions in their brain where they really believe they're animals or something. That doesn't mean that, we should have people dressing as animals or surgically modifying their bodies to appear like animals. And probably you can find scientific evidence that if you sterilize feces, it's safe to eat. But I don't want to go out to a restaurant and smell shit because I can't. There's a section just for shit eaters right next to me, and I can't complain about it. Otherwise, I'm bigoted. The future is scary, man. It's scary in large part because of Tumblr and cultural Marxism and misapplication of tools that were used to fight for the equality of people who deserved it, to fight for the normalization and public expression of fetishes. Then again, if the future is really just everybody having an orgy outside all the time, that actually doesn't sound too bad. And I don't want any of those fucking fluids on me, because who fucking knows what diseases they have. But I guess that's better than if we are all fighting wars all the time and killing each other. Better that we fuck each other than kill each other, I guess. Oh, good. Oh, wow, 9 dirt. 19 dirt. I stand corrected. Saves the fucking day. What was I doing? So if I had to come up with a timeline, I'd say it's going to be cybernetics. Then it's going to be literal anthropomorphic animal-human hybrids. Then, man, if aliens show up, that complicates everything. Because can we fuck aliens? What if they're much smarter than we are, but they still want to have sex with us? What's the morality of that? Can we consent to sex with a being that's that much smarter than we are? Can we be absolutely sure that it's not manipulating us into sex without our realizing it? Using its intelligence? What about people who want to surgically make themselves appear like aliens? I miss when the future was cool and not uncomfortable and gross and weird. People make shit uncomfortable, gross, and weird by injecting their sexuality into everything. And that applies to heterosexuality too. I'm one of those people who doesn't like, I mean, PSAs are fine. If you're a newlywed couple and you want to peck each other on the mouth, that's fine. But if you're just doing full-blown makeouts, if I'm stuck behind you in a fucking log ride at Disneyland and you're fucking doing full-blown makeouts like you're pawing at each other, that's uncomfortable for me. I'm generally sex positive. Like, I'm one of those people who says Hooters is not the problem. The problem is that there is not a equivalent for women where they can go see sexy men. So it's not that I'm some Puritan. It's that if I see stuff like that, I want it to be because I chose to. I don't want to not have a choice but to see stuff like that. I don't think the desire of a small percentage of the population to do stuff like that in public outstrips the right of the majority of the public to not have to look at shit like that. And at some point, almost anything you say, somebody's going to say that you're an Xist or a Yist, and you just have to not give a shit. You have to get to where you can make money and you don't have a boss. You are your own boss, so they can't fire you or have you fired. And be like, okay, I'm whatever you say I am, and I don't give a shit. What are you going to do now? Because that breaks the spell they have over you. They count on you being afraid and seeking their approval. Like, what do I do to please you? What do I do to get you to say that I'm a good person? Who the fuck made them the morality police? Just because someone presumes to wear that hat and step into that role doesn't mean that they fucking get to. And that's what Christians have been doing for generations, is presuming to dictate to us who's a good person and who's a bad person according to who lives most closely according to their fucking teachings. Are we just going to replace Christians with Tumblr mutants? It's the same fucking thing, too. Instead of original sin, you have ancestral sin of European colonialism. And you can't opt out of it. The only way to atone for it is to convert and to do what they tell you to do. And talk the way that they tell you to talk. Have the correct opinions. It's a fucking church. It's a church. You can't... It's designed so that it applies to everybody that they want to... They figure they don't have to convert, POCs, because it's already in their best interest to convert. But it's a harder sell to white men, so they need to have some mechanism in place to obligate you to join morally and say you're not a good person unless you join, and have this special badge that identifies you as a member of our club. And then, if you do what we tell you and use the right language, then you can be an official good person, according to us. And they react just as badly as Christians when you tell them, guess what? I define for myself what it means to be a good person. Because you're taking the power away from them. If they can no longer scare you and make you desire their approval, then they don't have any control over you, and that's when they really fucking get mad and try to destroy you. I sure fucking hope that space colonization is a way to get away from this shit. I hope I can go to Mars, and that it's not just more pervy mutants, but in spacesuits. Like, I hope they don't send affirmative action aughts, where they have rules to say, okay, you must send one furry, you must send one fecophile, you must send one X and Y and Z, so that you get to Mars and you're like, okay, finally, life is going to be normal again. There's just going to be human beings living normal human life. And you get there and it's a bunch of fucking monsters. It's a bunch of fucking gross, weird monsters with 10-foot long Fuda penises and colorful hedgehog heads or whatever the fuck. Just imagine DeviantArt stuff. Imagine if that was what Mars colonies were full of. Would you even want to go there? Would you want to live there? I guess maybe some of you would. Maybe that sounds pretty good to some of you. But then again, if that's the way things are headed, because people want life to be that way, and the technology is going to exist to make it that way, then there's no stopping it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. You kind of have to set yourself up as the cops and tell people what they can and can't do with technology. And that's no more tenable or defensible than Tumblr people saying you have to live according to our beliefs. Otherwise, we take your job away. That's the scary part of it. There's no controlling it. Whatever people want, if the technology eventually exists to make that possible, probably they're going to get it. And there's an old saying, if you want to destroy somebody completely, give them everything they want. Well, if you want to destroy society completely, then why did I mine stone? Why did I do that? I'm so fucking retarded today. That's another thing. Getting offended about the word retard. It's like getting offended by making fun of Amish people on the internet. They don't see you do that. If somebody does not have the mental faculties to understand that they're being made fun of and feel bad about it, then getting offended on their behalf is stupid. And you can illustrate this principle very easily. How you do this is when someone gets upset at you, offended because you use the word retarded, tell them you're retarded. That you can use that word because you're retarded yourself. And when they call bullshit, they say you can't be retarded. Say, how can you tell just from how I write that I'm not retarded? Because at that point they have to admit that there's a discernible difference in the ability to communicate between people with and without Down syndrome, at which point the basis for using that as a pejorative becomes self-evident. People use that to indicate less intelligence because retarded people are less intelligent. Using it as an accurate descriptor doesn't seem wrong to me. I wouldn't want to actually hurt the feelings of a person with Down syndrome, but probably I can't hurt the feelings of a person with Down syndrome because they would have to understand it, and they were too busy pretending to be a Ninja Turtle. Bless their hearts. Bless their retarded little hearts. I fucking love retarded people. They seem to enjoy life so much. Like, the less you enjoy life, the less it troubles you. All this heavy shit that I've been talking about the ethics of, like, mad science and shit, a person with Down syndrome doesn't have to worry about that. They just get to play with their action figures and eat their fruit snacks. And shit their pants. They can shit their pants whenever they want to. And they get a fucking trophy for it. They get shiny star stickers on their forehead for every dookie that they do in the pants. That's utopia. That's the future I want to live in. Why do I have so much andesite? What is andesite? Who has any use for andesite? Why do they keep putting shit in the game that makes mining only marginally more interesting, but adds nothing that's of any real utility? I understand it's called Minecraft, okay? I understand it's supposed to be about mining, but parrots? Okay, I can't be mad at you for that. Parrots are freaking cute in this game. But andesite? Who the fuck cares? Add underwater shit. I won't tell you again before I do a triple frown with a full furrowing of the brow. You don't want that. You don't want me to fucking bring it. I'll bring the furrowing like you've never seen before. Category 5. Maybe retarded people are just... Maybe the Hindu religion is true and they're the good ones. Like, if the best outcome you can get is being reincarnated. Because think about it, you get to be a child your entire life. And at least if you are in a developed country, somebody takes care of you. You never have to take on any real responsibilities. There's always somebody paying for your rent and paying for your food. And you stay simple enough mentally that you don't feel bad about it. Like, an adult would feel bad about having all that shit taken care of for them and not being able to contribute. But if you stay mentally a child, they're living the dream. Imagine being able to look right in the eye, someone right in the eyes, look them right in the eyes as you're soiling your pants. Like, you only get to do that when you're a baby or when you're retarded. The greatest thrill men have ever known. It's like the most dangerous game. Dare you live as few men dare dream? Dare you look into the eyes of the poop master? Damn it, I want to be retarded now. Maybe I already am, and everybody in my life loves me too much to tell me. But then how the fuck am I making money? Maybe I'm the best at being retarded, and I get paid for it. Or maybe I only think I'm making money from my writing, and it's actually government checks, and they're just not telling me because they don't want me to feel bad about it. What a twist! That's it. The next M. Night Shyamalan movie is a movie about a genius who is actually retarded the entire time and just being humored by people in his life. And the first half of the movie is just how he sees himself. And it's like Rick and Morty or Jimmy Neutron, where he sees himself as this incomparable genius because that's what they build him up to believe he is. But then in the second half of the movie, you see it's like the Truman Show, where there's this whole staff that just exists behind the scenes to make all of his accomplishments happen and seem realistic to him. Like Bill O'Reilly's career. Like that. Like, if I was retarded, I could fill a super soaker with my own pee and go to a protest and just unload my pee all over other people's faces and hair. Not even like for sexual reasons, just because a super soaker full of pee is funny. That's comedy Shakespeare. Don't lie. Like, the minute I said that, you were like, oh my god! And you went and looked on eBay for what like the best super soaker is right now. Don't just buy the super soaker. Remember, that's only 50% of the equation. You also need asparagus, so your pee smells as heinous as possible. That's part of the ammo. Probably somebody's had that idea already. I'm gonna Google after this. That'd be a pretty wicked self-defense mechanism. I mean, there's a lot of animals in the natural world who use really nasty pee to drive off predators. Combine that with super soaker technology. How come they never taught us about that in school? When it came to Black History Month, they taught us about that guy who invented peanut butter. Like, that's gonna impress anybody. Who fucking gives a shit? You smash peanuts and make peanut butter. That's not impressive. If they told us a black guy had invented the super soaker, that would have achieved the desired outcome of impressing upon us that our melanated American brothers can indeed contribute wicked awesome inventions to America's tech tree. Like, what do you care about more? What do you care about more? The invention of peanut butter or the invention of super soakers? Right? Right? That's what I thought. How the fuck do I get out of here? Oh, here we go. And the most patronizing thing is that peanut butter was actually invented before that by a white guy. That's something they don't tell you. They just change the attribution to a black man in order to create some accomplishments. When they have legit accomplishments that are a fucking lot cooler than smashing up peanuts. Mae Jemison, the first black woman astronaut, or like, who is that hottie who did most of the calculations for the Apollo missions by hand or like on some kind of primitive adding machine? And she was super cute. The thing is, they make movies picking those people out because they're the exception, and there's a very small number of people who are not pasty-ass white male devils who accomplish stuff like that. So they have to pick them out of the crowd and make a movie about them and imply that it was all them, that all the white guys in the background are just taking credit, which is kind of a slap in the face of those guys. But you know, whatever. There's this hetero white men. They don't get any credit. It's still fucking cool, though. If you're going to teach about the accomplishments of women and minorities, pick cool accomplishments. Those do exist. And also Ben Carson. Ben Carson's kind of... He shouldn't talk to the press about anything, because when he opens his mouth... It's It's a tragedy for everybody. He has some funny opinions about the pyramids and shit, but he's a extremely innovative and accomplished heart surgeon. So pick guys like that. Maybe don't play up their opinions about aliens or the pyramids or whatever, but you know, heart surgeon is fucking high prestige. That's something that students should know about. So whoever's designing these lesson plans is either really unusually impressed by peanut butter, doesn't know what a super soaker is, or is closeted KKK and wants to make, you know, American students think that peanut butter is the best that the black inventors are capable of. Peanut butter. I remember when we were learning about that kind of shit, and there was this one kid who kept asking who invented the Nintendo. And every other lesson he would try to make about Nintendo, you have to understand, during the 1980s, Nintendo was life. Every kid had a Nintendo. It was a phenomenon. But at the same time, I mean, history class does not have to be the history of technological developments which led to the Nintendo. Everybody understood where he was coming from, but it's like, dude, give it a rest. You can wait until after school for Nintendo time. School does not have to be Nintendo time. Although, at the same time, there's also that one, like half of us would bring our Game Boy in our backpack. And then during study hall or something, we would do that thing where you put your backpack on your desk and you have it halfway open. And you're playing your Game Boy inside there with the volume turned all the way down. And there was some asshole kid who would tell on us, who would report us one at a time, despite the fact that everybody was doing it. That happened with Tamagotchi, too. When everybody had a Tamagotchi, you have to fucking take care of your Tamagotchi or it dies. And that's not contrary to education. It is education. It teaches you how to take care of an animal. There was that one asshole kid who had to tell on everybody who had a Tamagotchi. And it's sad because they don't just die. They don't just die of, like, starvation. They die underneath a mountain of their own turds. If you've ever seen how Tamagotchis go, it's not pretty. Like, they shit until it covers the screen. And then they die underneath a big pile of their own shit. Like, some of the old people they find on Hoarders, on the Hoarders TV show. There's humans who die that way, too. Don't get me wrong-o. How come there's no reality show with Down syndrome people? Are they afraid they get laughed at? Because that's totally not what's fucking happening. I'm not alone in thinking that tards are radical and that they enjoy life way more than most people because they don't understand how shitty everything is. I want to see that. That's inspirational to me. I want to see somebody who enjoys life because they don't know about peak oil. And they don't know about how fucking rich Kim Kardashian is. They don't know. So they can be happy. They can be happy for all of us. And we can enjoy their happiness and get nourishment, emotional nourishment, from witnessing the happiness of somebody who doesn't know all the soul-crushing truths of the modern world. But probably because it's insensitive, we can't fucking have that. Like, how we can't have it... No, wait a minute. There was an Amish reality show. I take it back. It wasn't what I wanted. Like, I wanted the Amish reality show to be a dude cosplaying a time traveler, being like, "Ooh, I'm from the future. Look, I have a lighter. It makes fire out of nowhere. I have a cellular telephone by which I can call people across great distances." And just blowing their minds with his... it turns out they've seen all that shit, so that was maybe not my best idea. I was envisioning it as being like the crossover episodes between the Jetsons and the Flintstones, where the Jetsons went back in time, and apparently Bedrock is in their past. Although there's a fan theory that Bedrock is actually just in the same time period as the Jetsons, but that's how poor people live. Like the Jetsons live in Elysium, and all their sky houses is just where the rich people are, and everything below that on the Earth is people living like cavemen. Deepest lore. I kind of want that to be true, just because it's a really compelling fan theory. You ever notice how there were no black people in the Jetsons? It was the 1960s, but I mean, there was Star Trek. Star Trek had black crew members, so you'd think they would push the envelope a little bit more, unless, you know, depending on the personal politics of the people behind that show. Maybe that was the future that they wanted. I'm not sure. Then again, there were bigger problems with the Jetsons than that, logistically. Like, if you have the technology for sentient home robot maids, why does George still need to go to the office to push a button? Why don't you literally just have a Rosie the robot push the button that George pushes all day and do his job for him? Probably you could do it a lot more efficiently than that, but just based on what we've seen in the show, I understand it's all played for laughs, but it's kind of insulting to the intelligence of the viewer. Does this go here? I think so. These are all going to be glowstone. That's pretty good spacing, too. The other problem, of course, is that they live in the future, but Jane is still a housewife, and sexual politics have not changed at all. Which a lot of that science fiction got wrong. That was just wishful thinking. If they actually saw, if you could just send back footage on a media format that could be played in the 1960s, depicting a slut walk or a trans pride parade or a Tumblr social meetup, after they stopped projectile vomiting all over themselves, there would be a lot of... They would depict the future very differently, I think, and that they would try to prevent that from happening. That would be funny, though. I kind of want to do that now. I kind of want to go back in time and show Tumblr to a bunch of World War II soldiers. Be like, this is what your grandkids get up to. You like that? You're gonna go fight this war so that your grandkids can dress up like Timon and Pumbaa and fuck each other in the ass and post pictures of it to the internet? Look at him Hakuna that dude's matatas. Probably somebody will think that's beautiful. They'll be like, what a beautiful display of compassion to have these two Disney characters rimming each other. How much worse could it get than that, though? Because I feel like if it doesn't naturally get worse, they'll invent ways to make it worse. Like, imagine if there was actual sewer mutants, and their bodies are made out of shit. Probably there would be people on the extreme left who come to their defense and are like, we need sewer mutants in positions of power. We need a sewer mutant president. We need sewer mutant teachers. Despite the fact they smell like sewage and in fact are made out of sewage, we need them We need them in hospitals. I don't care if it's unhygienic. That's just bigotry. Sewer mutants. They would do it. And then they would decide for everybody that that's the world that we're all going to live in. Was that a fucking ghast? It was. Hold on, I'm gonna go make fun of him. Hey, you big white sack of jizz. Look at me. I'm frolicking. You like that? Look at my frolicking. It's so fucking merry. In my little soon-to-be garden paradise. This is going to be a nice little garden, and there's nothing that ghasts can do to ruin my mood. Ghasts, there you go. What if ghasts were real? And if they're intelligent enough that you could tame one enough to make it look like a decent, productive member of society, despite the fact that the rest of them try to kill you on sight, probably somebody on Tumblr would be like, we need ghasts everywhere. We need to bring ghasts from the Nether to the overworld, integrate them into our society, and anybody who opposes this should have their job taken away and should die on the street of starvation. And then the reality, these people would live far away from where the ghasts were actually going to be integrated in society, so they wouldn't ever experience the consequences of it. They would just be the ones agitating it for it to happen. Like the people who agitate for refugees never live near where the refugees live. They never actually have to suffer any of the ill effects. Then when you show them articles about mass rapes and mass gropings on Christmas, and the police covering up the rapes because they didn't want that to vindicate the right-wing parties who are anti-immigration, even though it totally does vindicate them and proves they were completely right the entire time. Or that there are now private schools there are schools in Britain now that segregate boys and girls, yet they receive public money because the Quran requires it. And that's something we were told wouldn't happen, but it's happening. And that's the weirdest shit of all, because these people are often very anti-Christian, which I am too, but the thing is, they don't seem to understand. Islam is not the opposite of Christianity. Christianity is homophobic, but Islam is more homophobic. Christianity is misogynistic. Islam is more misogynistic. It is everything that they dislike about Christianity times 100. But they support it because, the devil you don't know is more appealing than the devil you do know. And the devil you do know, you hate a lot more. They don't have any personal experience yet with being persecuted by Muslims, but they do have experience with being persecuted by Christians. So they imagine wrongly that the enemy of their enemy is their friend, and that even if you show them examples of Muslims being extremely violent towards gays and apostates, they imagine, I don't know what goes through their mind. They must think that magically, as soon as Muslims hear feminist rhetoric and social justice ideology, that by some miracle, a switch will flip in their brain and they'll convert. They'll stop being misogynists, and it will work out perfectly for them, just because it has to, and they're complete idiots and have destroyed themselves if it doesn't work out. They need it to work out, so it has to, just has to. A lot of those people have been some of the earliest victims of their own poor choices in that respect. I really wish I had bone powder. I saw this news article about a social justice warrior who... You notice how many white girls go on a virtue signaling feel-good trip to Africa so they can take a picture of themselves with starving children? To imply that they're doing anything at all to help the kids, which they're not. They're just taking selfies. And be like, oh, it's so beautiful and inspirational. These children, they have nothing, but they still smile and have lust for life. They smile because they think you're going to give them some money. But yeah, one of them did that. They went on that kind of a trip to say, look at what a good person I am. Look at how cosmopolitan. Look at how worldly I am. Look at how tolerant I am. And guess what happened? She got raped. A bunch of dudes ran a train on her when she was walking back to the encampment that she was staying at that night. A bunch of dudes accosted her and took turns plowing her ass. And instead of learning from it and being like, okay, maybe not every non-white person is a saint just because Tumblr said so, she doubled down. They did an interview with her, and she doubled down and said, you know, it would be really easy to use this to make it look like the right-wing narrative is correct, but it's important not to hold against these people because they have been made this way. They've been made violent by colonialism, and basically blaming white colonialists for the rapists' actions. I think that's the most I've ever thrown up in my mouth without it escaping. I'm just going all over my pant legs. You can find this. It's not hard to Google the terms, like African aid worker raped article. It's the fucking dumbest, most perverse, sick thing I've ever seen. Anywhere you go that there's impoverished, desperate men, if you're a hot woman, that's not to say that it's her fault, obviously. It's the men's fault. She had to know that was dangerous, though. Like, if you spend all your time saying men are dangerous, do they become suddenly safe if they're not white? Do men stop being a risk of rape to you if they're not white? Is it only white men who do that? In fact, I feel bad for her, but it's really hard to, because her own dumb ass and her own wrong political ideas caused that to happen. It's like how where I live, there's a lot of sympathy for the poor from one crowd, and then there's a lot of hatred for the poor when the truth is somewhere in the middle. We have a lot of meth heads, basically. And the conversation on homelessness is always divided between people saying, well, of course they steal shit. Of course they put their tents everywhere. They have to sleep somewhere. You should sympathize and try to imagine what it's like to be homeless. Usually transplants who come to live here and don't realize that 90% of the homeless here are tweakers who steal bicycles to take them apart for bike parts to sell to get more meth. So the fact that somebody's poor does not make them a saint, and that's one of those things that the minute you say it, every white girl with a Tumblr, that's the great irony of it. It is white people are the problem, but it's specifically white girls, white teenage college-age girls. Who enable this stuff, and in the name of looking like they're a good person, they want to seem like they're the nicest person ever to live. And you would think a bunch of people competing to look like the nicest person would have beneficial social effects, but in fact the opposite often occurs. Because you enable people who are homeless because their meth habit ate up all their money. All their money either went into their veins or up their nose, and now they steal other people's property in order to get more drugs. And that's contrary to the narrative of sympathy. I feel you when it comes to empathy for other human beings and living things in general, but you have to understand that being in a shitty situation doesn't make you a good person. Often, it is sometimes the case that people get into shitty situations by being shitty people. And it's tempting to believe that that's always the case. That's the other extreme. There are some people who think that all poor people are evil and that that's how they get poor. But then there's other people who think that that's never the case. The truth is often Often, not always, but often somewhere in the middle. And because it suits neither side's narrative, because humanity, for some reason, craves extremes to a self-destructive degree, the poor either have to be 100% good or 100%, like the rich. If you believe Republicans, the rich are saints and brilliant and the best people ever to live. And if you believe the Democrats or college communists, all rich people are evil. They're a mixture. They're a mixture of the two, but that doesn't suit either narrative. So both sides are opposed to that point of view, and that's the best way to make an enemy out of both of those groups of people. That looks so fucking cool up there. It was a good decision to build that there. You can almost see every building from here. So yeah, what do I want? Personally, I think that if you build a cyborg and it has the brain of an animal that is already legal to eat, then there's nothing especially wrong with using it to control a robot. I also think that we shouldn't deliberately create any living things that are going to be a difficult integration into our society. So we shouldn't create any hybrids that are going to make you won't have to solve civil rights problems if you don't create those problems, basically. What else have we discussed? I want to see moon colonies. I don't think using technology to indulge our weird, sex stuff gets us closer to the goal of having colonies on other planets, and it does take money and attention away from it. We're so concerned with satisfying our libido and our every bizarre fantasy. We'd rather have that than the continuation of the human species. Maybe we deserve what we get. Maybe we'll just fuck ourselves to death in a huge pile of glistening, oiled up, mutant bodies with tentacles and flippers and hair and fur and teeth. And then after we fucked ourselves to death, whoever's left can set it on fire. And it will be for the best. And that will be the only lasting legacy of humanity will be that big pile of ashes. If that's what people want, then I guess gotta give people what they want. Oh yeah, the Megabots battle. The first giant robot battle in history happened recently. There's not really time to talk about that though. It was kind of eh. It was super staged. It was like WWE but with giant mechs, because they couldn't do anything really dangerous. It would risk injuring the pilots, which is kind of the downside of having battle bots on a huge scale with humans inside the robots, is they can't be as rough with each other, so they kind of have to stage everything. But at the same time, for the same reason that WWE is still fun to watch, even though it's staged as hell, this was fun to watch too. They bashed the hell out of the exterior of the robots, and there was a lot of cool shit that happened. They rolled over and destroyed the announcer booth after the announcers escaped. A drone was launched. The drone was snatched out of the air and caught on fire and got stuck on the cockpit of one of the robots. It was pretty cool. It was cool just to see an actual, real live-action giant robot battle that wasn't special effects. And if that's what they keep doing, I'd be cool with it. I'd be cool with battle bots. If they made the robots about car-sized, so that the impacts were more energetic and there was more mass involved, I think that would have made it a success in the US to begin with. It's still a success in Europe. It's just that for some reason in America, battle bots didn't catch on. And I think it's because you got to make the robots bigger. That's what the future should be about, is fucking giant robot battles and moon colonies, not fucking people dressed up as Star Fox and Zazu, that bird from The Lion King, and getting their dicks out and rubbing their dicks together in oil while I'm trying to fucking enjoy a day in the park. That's the only moral to the story that you're going to get.